this on Framingham. You're going to get to watch me build this show as it goes along. I've been planning on doing this show for about 10 years, and I've collected a whole lot of obsolete and otherwise discarded television equipment for doing the show. I have several cameras here, some equipment, and what I want to do with the show is talk about things that are happening here in Framingham that you might not see on any of the other shows. There are a number of shows on Access Framingham that do talk about current events, but there are some that, I think miss, and I think that I can fill the gap by bringing you some of those stories. I have a graphic here for me. So I just made that up a few minutes ago. So I'll try to make better graphics as the show goes on. So I'm going to take breaks and come in back to bring more stories as we go along. But I just wanted to get this first show going, and I'll see you in a few minutes. So the first story that I'm going to read was one of my favorite from the last few years, and as the show goes along, I'll try to catch up to more current ones. Story 1, Slice of New York. And this is, I'm reading from the Framingham source. Updated, owner of Slice of New York in custody after shots fired in Knobscot. This was updated just July 20th of 2017. Framingham police confirmed that in custody is Justin Breakspear, 30, of 14 Whitting Road. He was charged with assault with a deadly weapon. More charges could be filed. Residents of the Knobscot section of Framingham had been asked to shelter in place until he was apprehended. On Thursday, Framingham police responded to a civil matter between a man and a woman at Slice of New York. This was at 8047 Edgell Road. Both were advised and police left. But then at 8:30, Framingham police received a call from Mass State Police that a woman was reporting a man had left her home with a gun and the man was Breakspear, said Framingham police. And due to his history, many officers responded. Once on scene at 14 Whitting Road, the officers reported shots fired. The suspect left the area, and this is the part where it gets good, was that he ended up on the roof of Slice of New York. So they actually had to bring in the air wing of the Mass State Police to shine a light on this guy, I guess, and he kind of brought out every cop in Framingham. So as of 11 o'clock that night, he was in custody. There are no casualties, according to Framingham town officials before it became a city. And so this guy, he had kind of an interesting history. He and another guy started Slice of New York a few years ago, and it actually was considered one of the better pizza places in Framingham. It was directly across the street from Gianni's, which is another big popular pizza place here in Framingham. But if you Google his name, find out that he kind of had a long, interesting past to him. I'm going to go back to, let's see, oh, that page didn't work. To go back to 2006, if I can find a copy of this news article. Fortunately, it looks like I've gone too far. Let's see. Well, basically, from what I recall, he was once arrested for having a gun, I think, without a permit, at which time he said that he didn't own the gun or know anything about it, But then they noticed that he had a tattoo of the gun on him with the serial number of the gun that he claimed that he didn't know anything about. So I don't know how you explain that one. So that was one part of his history, but it looks like he tried to turn his life around, start a pizza place, but I guess things went slowly downhill. Now, the other part that I remember about this was, let's see if I can find it here. Was when, let's see, I can find it here. Basically, the police also advised the Board of Health, I guess, to check the place out, and the next day they put up a big sign saying closed. They found unsanitary conditions. They found cleaning fluids mixed with food not being refrigerated properly, a lot of flies, and evidence that I guess the guy had been living there. And I can tell you that I believe I went there for pizza a couple weeks before this happened, and the service was really long. They were struggling because Liberty's Famous Pizza had gone on vacation, and they were trying to keep up. And I just remember guys were always yelling at each other at this place, so it seemed rather dysfunctional. And I think I waited about 45 minutes for pizza that turned out to just be done and sitting on top of the oven, but they didn't know whose it was until they started asking. So anyways, that's the story behind the Slice of New York story, and I'll come back in a couple minutes here with another story for you. So one of the things that's happened here in Framingham that's pretty much impacted everybody is that Framingham voted last year to become a city. And I have some news coverage of that happening that I'll share with you in a minute. Yvonne Spicer was elected Framingham's first mayor, and she comes with a number of distinguishing accomplishments here. Looking at an article now from the Metro West Daily News. When she won the election, she was quoted as saying, "My heart is full," she said to a crowd of cheering supporters from the steps of the Memorial Building. It was her first appearance after learning she was the voters' choice for Framingham's first mayor. A political outsider, she soundly defeated former state rep and town selectman John Stefanini in a race that grew nastier as the election day neared. So there was a lot of mudslinging, I guess you would call it. Things were getting pretty nasty in the run-up to the election last November. I'll share some of the videos that I have here. But first, let's take a look at the coverage of Framingham becoming a new city, and I'll bring that up right now.
New at 11, the state's largest town is no longer a town, it's now a city.
Nearly 70,000 people live in Framingham, and after more than 300 years as a town, voters have decided to rewrite history. WBZ's Ken McLeod tells us why.
As the last evening commuters rolled back into Framingham, the last few voters trickled in.
The town government around here is a bit of a joke, and there's no accountability.
I want to stay at town because I don't feel like this charter is equitable.
The charter he's talking about converts Framingham from a town to a city. Framingham's last effort to go city was 20 years ago, and 68% of the voters rejected it. Since then, this place has swelled to more than 70,000 residents, making it by far the biggest town in the state. What's the big deal? Well, the yes forces argue the current combo of town manager, selectmen, and sparsely attended town meetings might have worked in the 1700s, but doesn't have the teeth or agility to govern today.
It's very romantic. but it is not particularly efficient or effective in managing a $300 million municipal corporation.
But opponents fear that installing a mayor, 11-member city council, and school board puts too much power in the hands of a few, even if those few are elected.
Switching to city status takes people's voice away.
And tonight, the pro-city troops won in a squeaker by only 100 votes. This mother believes it'll make a difference.
The hope was with better representation on high levels of government, the schools will get a little more attention.
Elections will come in the fall, and next January, this sign will say city limits. In Framingham, Ken McLeod, WBZ News.
So that was a story about the city, and now I have another one about the first mayor, and I'll pull that up here now for everybody to see.
Amen.
Cheers and roaring applause, Yvonne Spicer made history twice in Framingham. She's the city's first mayor and the first black woman to be elected mayor by voters in Massachusetts. Spicer won the city's top position on a promise to be the people's mayor.
Well, today, that work begins. WBC's Ken McLeod is here tonight to show us how Spicer plans to lead the state's newest city. Ken?
Liam, when Framingham decided to become a city, it was by just 100 votes. But when it elected Yvonne Spicer as mayor, the margin was much wider. Today, the political newcomer formally accepted that mandate, acknowledging there's a bunch of eyes on her and a lot of work to be done.
Amen.
When her hand came off the Bible, Yvonne Spicer was the first black woman in state history to be popularly elected mayor.
One day, one step at a time.
She was humble in her acceptance, but confident in her outlook.
I'm confident that together we will do a great job.
By we, she means the new council and school board, also sworn in today, as Framingham makes the leap from the nation's oldest town to the state's newest city. It's the place she moved as a fledgling teacher all those years ago.
Framingham opened its arms to me, and I graciously accepted the invitation. I started my career here. I bought a home here. I established roots here. I raised my niece here.
And now she's mayor here, a political novice who swamped her more experienced opponents with a grassroots campaign, urging Framingham's diverse residents to help her reinvent the city's struggling schools.
I encourage all of us to reach out to each other and discover how we are woven with similar thread.
She's also pledging to recruit new business as this new city looks for an economic rebound.
We're building this ship as we drive it. And yes, we will trip up sometimes, but we'll get back on course.
No surprise, some big political names turned out for this inauguration, but Yvonne Spicer made it pretty clear where her loyalty lies.
This city chose me.
Spicer says she's already met with each incoming city councilor, and everyone seems to be on the same page. She's also encouraging ideas from residents to help design the city's new seal, so it can be a symbol that reflects today's Framingham, not yesterday's. Lisa?
And the future.
So that was the story about the new city, and so the one big controversy that seemed to kind of linger throughout the mayoral race was with John Stefanini, and there was a story here that covers it. I was able to find this online, and it talks about the controversy over the something that happened early on in the race. So here's that story.
Framingham candidate for mayor caught on surveillance video removing his opponent's posters and flyers from a library. Police just released this new video, and now the candidate is apologizing for his actions. 7's Nicole Averio has that story.
Caught on camera, a candidate for mayor seen removing an opponent's campaign materials from a town library.
Disappointed, disillusioned, sad for Framingham.
Earlier this month, volunteer Norma Schulman left a poster board and a clipboard containing signatures for candidate Yvonne Spicer in the library lobby. Hours later, when she returned, they were gone.
My first thought was that someone had complained that it was there and maybe the librarians had taken it down just to stop the complaints.
But police say this video shows John Stefanini on his phone staring at the poster board. Moments later, he grabs it and heads toward the doors. He then puts the materials down and talks with the woman. Seconds later, he re-enters and leaves with those papers.
It's a very unfortunate incident that happened.
Spicer is one of 7 candidates running for mayor. It's Framingham's first election since voting to become a city. Stefanini initially defended his actions, claiming that it's been a long-standing practice to not campaign in public buildings. But volunteers broke no laws, and police now investigating, and Stefanini left apologizing. In a statement, he said in part, "I have the utmost respect for civil and dignified political discourse, and I am sorry that my actions that day did not meet that standard." Spicer doesn't know if she was specifically targeted, but just wants to move on.
I do hope that we can move forward in this election and focus on the issues and the concerns of the citizens.
To have their name appear on the ballot, each potential candidate needs to collect 500 signatures before July, and then that first election will happen in November. In the newsroom, Nicole Oliverio, 7 News.
So that was that story. I think that ended up hurting him a lot in the final results. It was clear early on in the primary that he had a lot of catching up to do, but ultimately the final vote was for Yvonne 9,128 and John Stefanini 6,455. City Councilor at large, George P. King and Cheryl Tully Stoll won that part. Charlie Sisiski got the city District 1 Councilor. District 2 is Pam Richardson. District 3 is Adam C. Steiner. District 4 is Michael P. Cannon. 5 is Dennis L. Giambetti. 6 is Michael M. Rossi. 7 is Margaret Shepard. And District 8 is Judith A. Grove. 9 is Eduardo A. Torres. So it got a lot of national coverage because she was the first mayor to be voted in by popular vote in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So that had a lot of groundbreaking coverage of it. Spicer was, she was a Brooklyn native. She's 55. She moved to Framingham in 1985, where she began a career at Farley and Walsh Middle Schools, and then went on to Framingham High School, working for 16 years as both a classroom instructor and administrator focused on technology education. She earned a doctorate in educational leadership and is now the Vice President of Advocacy and Educational Partnerships at the Museum of Science. Working in startup divisions at the museum, Spicer travels the country, building capacity for STEM programs in local schools. She also actually campaigned far less than Stefanini. Stefanini brought in $113,000 in campaign contributions, whereas Spicer only brought in $70,000. But she took a commanding lead with 54% of all the votes in the primary election in, I think it was in April of 2017. So her campaign really it reached out extensively to female voters. This is from the Metro West Daily News. She touted a network of grassroots volunteers and donors, many of whom were women. Spicer also had the backing of Emily's List and the Massachusetts Women Political Caucus, among other groups. So she is the first popularly elected female African-American mayor in the state's history. So that's the story about the city becoming a city. Probably have more information on that in the coming weeks. Well, as you can see, I got some fancier graphics. Like I said, this is a show that's kind of being built as it goes along. I wanted to point out that we have a website and we have a YouTube channel, so you can check us out at focusonframingham.tv. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at mike@focusonframingham.tv. You can ask me any question you want, like why is this show so crappy? It's a work in progress. I'll get better as I go on. If you have stories about Framingham or anywhere around Framingham you'd like me to cover, feel free to email me, and I'll see if I can have it on an upcoming show. I was out and about today. This is the end of March, and I drove on Route 27 in Natick and drove by where the old Building 19 used to be, which is now becoming, I think it's going to be some sort of shopping center. I had a short video that I found a few years ago about Building 19 that I always thought was fun to watch. So I'm going to go ahead and share that video with you now.
Hi, we're here in front of historical landmark Building 19. Behind me you just saw the great water tower they have out here, which supposedly was built by Frank Lloyd Wright. No one knows its true purpose, but several people actually believe that it is filled with the homeless urine they pump into the vents of this particular store. It's funny because then you can look at these people and now you know what happens to them, but here they don't know what's going to happen. Now, this is before she locked her kids in the car and shaved her head. from the Lost episode where Dora got jaundice. It looks like when they're making all the worst ties, they just sewed them all together and then made this tie, and then sold it here for $2. Keeping up with all the latest trends. There's a dark brown stain on this. Let's see what we get for prize. What are you supposed to happen?
Hey, I hope you enjoy it. Here it comes. Thank you. Please come to me again.
It's a tiny plastic puppy.
Well, I always thought that that was a fun video about Building 19. One of my favorite memories about Building 19 was when I bought a mattress there, and they accidentally rang it up twice, but then when the cashier went to try to void the second transaction, they couldn't because the text on the button had worn off. So they had to look at another cash register to see which button was the void button so they could void my item. So I always thought that that was a fun place to shop, and I do miss it. I do have a couple other videos here. These are videos that I found. These were videos I found on YouTube that were it was a compilation of live public access shows that had call-ins. Many of these, I think, are from the New York area. So here, take a look at, there's one that's pretty appropriate for this channel here. So let's get that queued up here. And here we go.
Please! Okay. Clean up your language. Don't you know we got children watching this channel?
Here's another one. So this guy has a show on how to be a player, and I guess you can call in and get advice live on the air on how one becomes a player. So here's another clip from that.
Hey Rudy, my name is Kip, and I'm a true player. I'm the biggest player honky in the world.
What? You mean to tell me?
Did you ever hear of me?
There are white players?
Oh yeah, man.
Oh my goodness! There are white players?
Yeah.
Oh my God! I salute you. I didn't think you guys know anything about playing.
Oh, you better believe it, dog.
You walking around with that flat button and just what?
What I'm saying.
Where you go, player?
It's a little song.
Huh?
He's a true player.
That's a true player. I'll talk to you later, player. Peace.